It's my pleasure today to invite Chris Garland, formerly of, well, just about every military under the sun in Southern Africa. We've just been discussing his synopsis before we came online, and it's very, very interesting. Now, for the sake of cutting out this neighbor of mine next door who's cutting his firewood at the exact time that I'm trying to interview Chris, I'm basically going to hand over to him, and he's going to start his story from the beginning, and we'll take it from there. It's going to be a good one. Over to you, Chris.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for letting me have an opportunity to talk. You keep these things inside of you, and you just you talk on an odd occasion when you have a beer or so, and then people tell you some more war stories and the rest of it. But besides that, let me just give you a little bit of background. I come from Natal. I come from a sugarcane growing family. I went to the local school here, Mtwali Prep, which my father went to, and he was not allowed to ride in a bus anymore over an incident, and he had to ride on a horse to school and so forth, but we went by car. I then went to school in Durban as a boarder, which associated me with a lot of other farmer people in the area of the North Coast and Zululand. And then I went to one of those Lani schools called Hilton College. And Hilton College, I left there in standard 9 for failing. And I went to Kearsney College and sailed through matric and got all the right documentation and got a matric exemption, which gives me a university pass. But then in that time we had conscription, and I was conscripted into the South African Defence Force. And I'd applied to go to the Navy, and myself and one other gentleman from Kearsney College got SA Simonstown, SA Simonsburg in Simonstown, and off we went. And he went on another course, and I said I wanted to be a diver. We finished our basic training, and we were just finishing a basic training when these fancy guys in green camouflage uniforms and fancy step-out uniforms arrived and gave us a big spiel inside of the hall, where the whole of the Navy was moved into this hall to listen to the story. And at first I said, that morning after the talk, I said, listen, I'm going to university. I'm going to study architecture like my uncle did, who built the sugar terminal in Durban. It was his design. I said, that's what I'm going to do. And that afternoon, I did the unthinkable and signed up into the Rhodesian Army. Now, my mother wasn't very surprised by that. Her father was a guy called William North Jones, he was a captain in the KAR and King's African Rifles in Tanganyika, Tanzania now. And he then ended up as a full colonel, and he was in the Remis because he was an engineer, and he ended up in Burma with the Gurkhas. And at one stage about to be court-martialed for adjusting 3-inch mortars to fire airbursts because the Zeros were coming in. They didn't have anti-aircraft to counter that, so they made these things burst in the area. And of course, with the British type of discipline, you do not fiddle or meddle with any ammunition. And he got a mention in dispatches and whatever for his ingenuity and so forth. But that was where basically the background came from. And off I went after being at Simonstown for about a month after the incident. I suddenly was put onto a train, sent to Pretoria. The next day I was on a train down to Durban. My dad signed the papers. The next day I was back on the train back. In those days, the trains worked. They don't work in South Africa anymore. Okay. Next day I was back in Pretoria. The next morning, about 5:30 in the morning, onto a plane, a Hercules C-130, and with a company of SAP, and we headed north. And many hours later, I was not used to the distance flying and all the rest of it, although I had flown before in Viscounts and things like that as a kid. But we flew and we ended up at Wankie, but not at Wankie Air Base. There's a base in the bushes there. Okay, which was built by somebody, and it has hangars and all the rest of it, and that's where we landed, and we sat outside there. There was about 7 or 8 of us, South African guys. The SAP got onto their vehicles and disappeared into the distance, and we sat around late afternoon, and hazy and hot as anything. And next minute we heard this droning sound, and sort of over the mapani trees appears what we call the pterodactyl. This is Dakota. And it landed on the runway, and out climbed this flight sergeant, and he said, guys, climb on. Climbed on, very pleasant. None of the South African, kom nou roofie, doen wat ek sê jy moet doen. He was very pleasant and polite, and we got on. We thought, whoa, are we in the right place? Anyway, they took us for a flight over Kariba, and we could have a look at Kariba, the lake. And then we landed at New Serum and Salisbury. And a Sergeant Swats picked us up on a truck, and he said, come on, guys, put your kit on the back of the truck. We're going around to customs side. A sergeant, very pleasant, not again, sprang rond and all the rest of it. It's just very polite. And he took us around the thing. He took our passports, put them in front of the customs guy, and the customs guy said, each one of you get in line here. He said, listen, sign, and they're joining the Rhodesian army. That's it, sign. The guy stamped it, and we were gone in half an hour, off to Cranbourne Barracks. And he then took us into a barrack room, very nice and neat place, and said, okay, there's your beds, take your pick. And we took our pick. Said, right, in about an hour's time, we're having dinner, and you guys will just go and fall in outside the front, and I'll take you. And he didn't march us. We just walked along, strolled along, like sort of we owned the place, but that was soon to disappear. 2 days later, off to KG6, we signed, dib, 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 dob, 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 hand in the air, and I swear total allegiance and life and death and all the rest of it to the Rhodesian Army, and we were in. It took about another week or so for enough recruits to be gathered together, because we were, of course, 50 at RLI. And, of course, our boss man there was a famous man who was an RSM of well-known RSM, Robin Tarr, and he was now in charge of the training. He'd become an officer. And we had Erasmus as the training troop sergeant major, a rather large gentleman. He only feared one person in his life, and I saw her appear outside the training troop once to come and speak to him. And he saw this huge man jumping around like a mouse in front of her. But anyway, that was his wife. And anyway, our training began, and the training was good. It was only 3 months in comparison to the South African Army, which was going to spend nearly a year. In those days, we were going to do 12 months national service, but that was extended later on to 2 years. But the RLI training was 3 months, of which 6 weeks was basic training. Now, in comparison to other places in the world, I think our version of basic training was rather advanced, because it took us right through from a Star and a FN Browning, Browning high power pistol, right up to a 3.5 rocket launcher, and with a 60mm mortar. And we had all the FN heavy barrel, and the mag, and a shotgun. And we were taught the Uzi as well, which I don't think other armies went to that detail in that period of time. Map reading, the rest of it, excuse me. The map reading was excellent. And in fact, as we were finishing the basic training, so that 6 weeks phase, we then one Sunday night and the medical, and we had all those different phases of fieldcraft and, why things are seen, shape, shadow, see, movement, and all the rest of it. Shape, shadow, shine, silhouette, spacing, and movement. See, it's stuck in my head.
The 5 S's, yeah.
Guys, 5 M's and an S, and the guys like S's and the M, like guys like Swats, Sergeant Swats were good, and Dino Newton were good instructors. We then were put onto the back of a RL, and we headed off into the dust. And as it was getting first light, they dropped us off in syndicates, and all they gave us, now we're recruits, all they gave us was a map, a protractor, and a pen, and they said, we'll see you at grid reference so-and-so tonight. I think there were 6 of us or 7 of us in a syndicate, and we had to locate where we'd been dropped and head off to where the grid reference was, the rendezvous. Which we duly did the first night. And then we thought, well, okay, we're here, relax. No, there's your first night march. And when we got there, they said, you'll find a pole, and in the pole was a tin and syndicate so-and-so. Next grid reference is the following, and you had to then find, and we had 5 grid references. We finished at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and next morning, off you go. 1 tin of bully, 1 packet of dog biscuits. Off you go. And that happened until we got to the, one interesting aspect there, the one night we slept by a river, our syndicate, by a bridge in a river. And it was so cold that our water bottles froze. Now that's in Rhodesia. Okay. I'm just trying to think of the dam near Katanga, the Ngezi Dam, Ngezi Dam area there. Anyway, so on the Friday morning, we given our grid reference, which showed us on the other side of the Ngezi Dam at the sort of parks board or whatever, game parks, recreational center. So we get to the walls here. Some of the syndicates, they decided to take a far left and a far right and all the rest. We got there, basically, I think, being lazy, or we'd got a hint that there would be something there for us. When we got there, we found some drums in the bushes, very conveniently sort of there, and some poles, and there was a pile of rope and all the rest. So we made our little flotation device, and we got onto it, and we paddled across. Much to Moose Erasmus's rage, we were using the butts of our rifles to paddle across the dam. Got to the other side. When we got to the other side, they said, right, that's it, guys. Get yourselves inside. There's tents, put your kit out. Right, we got in there. We had a braai that night. Next day on the Orels, and remember the old round-faced Orels, back to Cranbourne Barracks. We then started...
did the guys that walked around the lake, did they get there in time to have a braai?
Yeah, but tired. They had to do an extra sort of 7 to 10 kilos in comparison to get around the dam. Okay, some of them went the ones who went half right, they came back and then looked around and found the drums as well, and they saw us halfway across and thought, okay, they're going to try the same thing, and they came across. The instructors did have a one of those old S-boats, those aluminium S-boats for rescue purposes. It was on there with an old Johnson engine on it and so forth. The next Monday was conventional warfare. And there we were taught how to do trenches, defensive positions and things like that. And off we went to Nkoma Barracks, where we did an advance to contact. At the advance to contact, we then hit an unexpected amount of enemy and so forth, and we had to go into a defensive position, which we then had to dig trenches, and we dug our trenches, 2-man trenches, and with the mag gunner and all the rest of it in positions. And then we had to do a reconnaissance patrol, and then we had to go and do a fighting patrol, and then we advanced to contact, and then the enemy was far too strong, so we had to go through a withdrawal process out of the exercise. It was very cleverly done. Shortly after completing that, we then started the coin phase, and we were taught all the different patrols and ambushes and the rest of how to do it. And the funny thing was that observation posts, OPs as we call them, were not so prominent in those days at that stage, because the fire force concept hadn't really come into going. But that changed while we were on officers. So when I went on officers course later, so we finished our course, and we had a passing out parade, and of course 50, and our course was posted to support group. Support group was called support group. It hadn't become a commando yet, so we went to support group, and immediately we went into mortars, because support group had trackers and mortars and had some ferret scout cars. So we went to mortars, and we were at Mount Darwin, sent to Mount Darwin. We did our mortar course there on the 81s, which I enjoyed. But we were fortunate that we had just got there after an unpleasant incident had taken place earlier that year, where Dino Newton was injured, and a guy, Kruch Jonker, was killed and so forth. When what happened was the mortar bomb had a hairline crack in it, and when it went down the tube, it exploded, and the number one on the mortar was killed and so forth. Yeah, it was a very sad incident there. So everybody was a bit jumpy. The mortar training actually stood me in very good stead later. When I came later into my career, I had to go and do a mortar course again. And the techniques we learned there were far superior to what they tried to teach me later. Anyway, so we were at Mount Darwin, at that stage, my experience of Mount Darwin. And that's when we had the incident where I'll use the term gooks, attacked the place. And we had an incident where the siren went off and everybody then took cover and went into stand 2 position and whatever. And then the siren went on again. There was no gooks. So it wasn't. But now an incident took place. We had some SAP pilots and technicians. And of course, when the stand down took place, the pilot cocks his rifle, then takes the magazine off and then pulls the trigger, and the cartridge case that takes off out of there after he's pulled the trigger, because there's a round still in the barrel, hits his technician in the back, and we hear this shriek, "Oh my God, ek's geskiet." And the round stuck on his back. The cartridge case stuck on the deck. Well, the next morning at breakfast, of course, when the SAP guys came in there, everybody was falling on the floor saying, "Oh my God, ek's geskiet." So they were very embarrassed about it. Then at the end, near the end of the year 1973, I then applied to go on officer's course, and my application was done in a very formal matter on a memorandum 1033 document in pencil to a guy called Noble. Graham Noble was the commanding officer of officer commanding support group, and he then sent it through, and I went through onto Osby's course, which was in January. And then it just so happened that on the selection there, it turned out as my 21st. So certain guys on the course who I remember still, and I do have association with them, like Rod Smith and Mark Adams, then insisted that I had 21 downs. Well, I didn't get halfway in those days, and I was flat on my back. Anyway, so I went on officer's course, and there were about 50 guys on the beginning of the course, and we went into the main barrack room, and the stuff that I learned at RLI stood me in good stead, quite a lot of it good stead. But now what they were trying to teach you now was to be an officer and a gentleman, nose in the air and all that sort of thing, see? And we had a lot of phases of the course. It was, of course, 14 months or 13 months. In that, we also had an escape and evasion exercise, which was in the Chimani Mountains by Melseta. And that was quite interesting. We went up into the top of the hills and we operated there, and we had an interrogation thing where they captured all of us by pure trickery, directing staff tricks you into this situation. Climb under this staff, be taking you to the next phase, or when you get there, then there were a whole lot of artillery guys, and they captured us and put us into the cells inside of the BSAP cells there, where we spent the night. They wet us down, and the rest, and they interrogate us. What are you doing here? And you were supposed to only give your number, name, and rank, and whatever, blah blah blah. And there were certain guys who didn't even do that, and one specific guy, they couldn't get a word out of him. He didn't even swear at them, was a guy called Rod Smith, who turned out to be the best student on our course. Then we were released the next day, and basically that was the end of the sort of, we had a little exercise, an attack exercise on the enemy base and so forth, and then that was it, and we went back. Then the course slowly shrunk down, and I think we ended up with 13 guys. And PK van der Bijl was our reviewing officer. I've got pictures of that as well. And I've got pictures of the guys who survived and who were on the course and so forth, But out of those, first to go was my best friend, Norman Steen. He was killed 6 weeks after we became commissioned in a fire force operation. Then a guy, Jerry Fisher, went into a hut and he got shot as well. I'm just trying to think of the other guys. Bill Liversidge passed away recently. Des Passaportis passed away recently. Nick Banfield was injured. He went to engineers and he was injured when a clod of soil fell on an AP mine and so forth. So his vision went, and I believe he's in Australia somewhere. Then I'm just trying to think of who. Mark Adams was the stick man of the course. I'm just trying to think of who the other guy. Oh, then our man who was the signaller on the course. He went to signals, but after a certain period of time, he had to go and do, and instead of being an A man, he had to go and do general duties, and he was sent to 2RAR, and he was our real nerdy type of guy. And surprise, at around a place called Borehole 13 down in the Gonarajua, he fought off a massive battle against a lot of kooks and whatever, and ended up with a Bronze Cross. Surprise to everybody. I have seen him recently. He's actually in Spain, I think it is, and he teaches English there. His father was Thrush of remember the RBC announcer? I forget what his name was.
Alan Thrush, was it?
That's Alan Thrush, is the guy who was on course with me.
Right, okay.
His father was he used to do the news and all the rest.
Can't remember his first name. Yeah, I know the guy,
yeah. So, and then Des Passaportis, I think he also got a Bronze Cross. Mark Adams got a Bronze Cross. And then end of the course, I was sent to RAR, and I went to E Company 1 RAR under Major Terry Hammond. And 2IC was Mike Wilson, who actually lives in this area. I don't see him often, but he lives around here. Then it goes on to a bit of operational stuff. We were at Methuen Barracks at that stage, and we were sent to replace C Company 1 RAR, which was under old, what's his name? He's the guy who did the helicopter operations in northern Mozambique recently. But anyway, we were sent to Nkoma Barracks as the Army Reserve Company, and C Company came back to 1 RAR. Well, it was about a year and a half later, then we became C Company 2 RAR, moved down to Fort Victoria. But in that time that I was in E Company, we were up at just north of Mount Darwin, a place called Detito, and we did an HDF there, high density forcing. There were 15 companies surrounding this area. Now, Fire Force had become the thing at that stage, and the scouts were doing their pseudos, and they'd located this group of tours that were going to meet in an area. And so there were a whole lot of TF companies and RAR companies and so forth who were then, excuse me, they were going to sit and surround this area, and then slowly we'd close in and we'd annihilate these guys. Anyway, we've seen companies. Eventually, we were told then, okay, we're going to advance. Okay, and we were closing the circle on these guys, and eventually our company, an extended line, was to advance on the tours where they were. Well, we hit a contact, and I always go back to possibly the Battle of Hastings, because there, every stick, okay, remember my platoon had 9 sticks, all right, so there's 3 platoons, and you've got 9 sticks in each one's got a mag, a machine gun, and each one's got a 28R rifle grenade. And you just see into the air these 3x9, 27 rifle grenades lifting off into the air and down onto the enemy position where they were supposed to be. The helicopter that was flying above us sprung back into the air about 300 feet out of the area in total shock. And we ended up in quite a contact. The one platoon commander, he got a little bit overzealous and was sort of got semi-caught in the crossfire and didn't get shot. But the other one, Paul Hopcroft, he got a ricochet off, hit the magazine of his rifle, and the spring sprung out and cut the back of his hand wide open. So he was a bit incapacitated. I ran into where a grenade exploded, and I got some shrapnel in the sort of inner parts, thighs of my legs. Of course, I dropped my drawers as quickly as possible to confirm everything was there. And the troops, of course, were hysterical with laughter. Remember, we were wearing shorts in those days.
Yeah.
We weren't wearing full camo and all. We a shirt and a pair of shorts. Of course, now I'm checking everything else. Everything's still attached, and the troops are hysterical in the middle of a battle and everything. We end up that we got quite a few tours and so forth. We actually had one guy put up his SKS and was shooting at us, and then he put the rifle above his head and was shouting, "Geneva Convention, Geneva Convention." Well, nobody heard that, of course, and he was blatted, okay, which really upset the chopper pilot, the ground forces, the gunship commander over there, who landed behind us. He said, "I saw what you guys did, that's not what you're supposed to do. We needed that prisoner." I said to him, "Try and stop that amount of people shooting at one man. 27 machine guns firing at one guy, sort of thing." Wow. Anyway, so
before you go on any further, Chris,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you describe the character or the attitude of the African soldiers in the RAR in combat? Were they aggressive, or did you have to coax them forward, or how did they operate?
Let me give you a little bit of African sort of tradition. When they go into battle, the Nduna is in front. Okay, that's the way it works. Or with the Shona, the Ishe is in the front. Okay, and he's supposed to be there guiding them in with his talk and and all that sort of thing. Okay, now the Shona are not exactly aggressive. They're pastoral people and agriculturalists. They're not, except for the Makaranga down in the southeast, they're the more aggressive aspect of it. But the rest of the different parts, 5 different groups of the Shona tribe are not really aggressive. The Indebele are, okay, culturally, because they were Zulus before. And surprise, surprise, that in the areas around Sanyatsen, there's quite a little group of Xhosas that live there as well. Okay, so your 5 Shona groups, your Intebeles and the west, your little group of Xhosas, then down in the southwest, you've got the Shangans, and up in the top in the Zambezi Valley, you've got the Batonka people, who are really, really ancient and backwards. They even smash out their teenage daughters' teeth to make them look ugly so that the slavers don't come and take their children. Okay, and then the women smoke a thing called sasori, with their little calabash pipes and whatever, which keeps them quite happy all day, if you know what I mean. It's like ganja, dacha.
So you sort of have to pull them forward in a combat situation, do you?
You have to lead. You have to lead. And specifically at night when you go on patrol, you should be in the front, which is not tactically sound, okay? But if you want to get anywhere, otherwise the patrol gets slower and slower and slower. And that I'll get to one situation where we were after I was in the Hondi Valley, and that was rugged. We were there for 6 months in the Hondi Valley, and that was rough stuff there. It's serious war zone that was for us. But going back again after the HTF and whatever, the troops, they will advance. There was no problem getting them to advance and go forward, and the rest of it is that when you're there, there's no problem. Okay. We just did the statistically later, we tried to do comparisons when we went on courses, kill rates between RLI and RAR and so forth. The white young boy from Joburg, he just slaughters them. Okay. That's the way it works. Okay. He doesn't, there's no qualms about him. And the funny thing is that some guys I met who came from Joburg could track like you couldn't believe. And I saw some farm boys from Rhodesia who couldn't follow an elephant track across a dry river bed. And that's the difference. It's a skill type of thing that you don't choose it, it's given to you. Then after we finished with that, that we was at Nkoma Barracks and whatever, we then had a change of command. Terry Hammond went and Nick Fawcett came in. Nicholas Galloway, Charles Fawcett, BCR, and the rest of it. Nice guy, really nice guy. You didn't hesitate to write in your report, I would hesitate to read from this young man. But a nice guy. I really liked him and got on with him, and he was very professional. We then ended up going down into the Zambezi Valley at a place called Kaitono, and to get involved in a project, a government type project. What we would do, at that stage they were having the protected villages it was part of the Malayan CT situation, counter-terror, the communist terrorist situation. They had protected villages there, and we're trying it there. And so what we did was we went down and we went to this protected village, and we then, what happened was guys were brought in, some farmers, and the engineers put their bulldozers in. They cleared about 1,000 hectares of Mapani with the bulldozers and with the rippers and everything, cleared it all, so that in came I think they were the Topper family, as far as I remember, and they came in there with their tractors and they plowed the land. And then we got to the local population, and we had this wire thing that it was about every sort of foot, so I'd use foot, centimeter, 30 centimeters or whatever, you had a ring, and then it was knotted to the next piece for 100 meters. Then on the one end, you had a guy standing there, and behind him was a guy with a stick. And in the middle, in that 50 meters, you had another guy there with a guy behind him with a stick, and a guy behind him with a guy with a stick. And then they would put the stick in the ground. It was measured about 1 yard, 1 meter, and they'd bring the wire and they'd move it. And then a guy behind would stand there with a stick, and he'd punch holes in the ground, okay, where those rings were. And then behind them would come either a guy or one of the women, and with a bag, and she would put 2 seeds in each hole. And behind that came a guy with, those baby milk powder type spoons type thing. They would have that, and then they would put that little bit of fertilizer in there, and then they would cover it over with their feet. Okay, and then they would say, wire! And the wire would move forward underneath, and we planted this whole area out. 6 weeks later, then we had those same little spoons, and then you put in for stalk borer. You put stalk borer stuff in each plant, and then they went in, they weeded and everything like that. We were there for months and months and months, through the Christmas period, because the season starts in October. The planting season starts in October. And we were there until it came to harvest time, and we harvested. We got the povos, the population, the people to harvest the maize, and then it was packed into bags, and they kept a certain amount. They were each given, and then the government sold that off, and they were each paid a certain amount. Well, we were going to be sent back the next year, and the people said, no, we've got enough Chibagwe for the next year or two. You don't need to plant anymore. So that stopped.
Typical,
okay,
isn't it?
Well, that's what it's about. You know what I mean? Subsistence farmers, if they've got enough maize, it doesn't matter if there's a drought at the next year. That's the way it works.
That's the way it works, yeah.
Yeah. And then at the end of that thing, then now Nick Fawcett, I'm just trying to think who the district commissioner was, came down, and Nick Fawcett stood up, and for nearly an hour in very, very, very proficient Shona. Now, remember, he came from RLI, became an RAR officer as a company commander. In that period of time, he then stood up for nearly an hour and gave a speech in Shona. Let me tell you, the troops were blown away, and the local povos were blown away by that, because he spoke it even better than the district commissioner could speak it. And that's the kind of guy he was. He was very professional. Then we went back into Nkoma Barracks, and I'm just trying to think of whether at that time we were now becoming C Company, and when we were becoming C Company of 2 RAR, which we went and stayed inside of the showgrounds at Fort Victoria, and the officers had a little house inside the suburbs of Fort Victoria, and then later it became the hotel, became the officers' mess, but and they hadn't built Masvingo Barracks by the airfield yet, and then we were then deployed into the Hondi Valley. Hondi Valley was, I remember the first day driving down that dirt road, it became a tar road later, driving down that dirt road, going down to, I'm trying to think of what the airfield's name was, Borera or Bora or something like that. And we then stayed there for a couple of days and so forth. Then we moved to the district commissioner's camp, which was near the Pungwe River, just before you get to Eastern Highlands Tea Estate. Because you go past, if you want to get to the other Katiwa states, you went past Eastern Highlands, turned right, and up you went further northeast along to Katiwa. Anyway, but we based up in there, and it became an interesting place, and actually for me a very sad place. We lost in one of the platoons when platoon warrant officer Pongweni Moses was the platoon commander. Thank you. That's my cup of tea.
Excellent.
The Pongweni Moses, who got a BCR and so forth, and he also became an officer later, got involved in a contact and in Veal, the machine gunner was shot in a very difficult situation at last night, in the open, and it was difficult to excavate, to get the body out and all the rest of it. So we lost this guy in Veal there. And then there were quite a few other little incidents that took place, and one incident a group of incidents. I was told to go up, and we were going to put a transistor radio inside of some people's kaya, okay, in the roof of it. And this thing would then be able to monitor what was being said on our ep158 radios, you see. And so what happened was, we walked in at night, and we were climbing up this pathway, and the guy in front, Corporal Corons Mbere, said, gave the sign, the hand sign, take cover. We took each side of this pathway. Now, not say it's jungle there, okay? It rains 200 days a year, okay? So it's a serious jungle with buffalo bean inside of that bush. I don't know if you've experienced buffalo bean or ever heard of it. Nasty stuff. Anyway, we were going up, and he said, okay, Henry. We sat there and for a while, and we thought, no, there's nothing's happening. Okay. And he said, put his hand to say, Pambire. Yeah. And these gooks opened up at us at about 3 to 5 meters away. And they actually ran over us to get down the hill and out of the way. Nobody shot nobody. But there was a lot of expended ammunition flying all over the place. And we could hear them running down the path, because there were 3 sticks. I had 3 sticks. I was the second stick. And we could hear them running. The manyateras and whatever, and the mafama shoes running down the pathway, and you could hear the dogs from that village. And we got on the radio and said, we've had a contact, but they're gone, long gone. We can hear they're about 5 kilos already gone. That was okay. So, right. So we carry on up, get into position for last light. My sergeant, Wapanyika, is now going on another little route. He's got to go along a road to go to, and he bumps into a group of gooks. And they open fire, and he fires an M970 rifle grenade. We had the M970. I don't know if you ever experienced the M970, which was a white phosphorus grenade. And he fired the thing, and I think luck, this thing detonated and exploded over this group running away. And all their woolly matted hair was on fire, and they were diving. They ran down. We got the information later. They dived into the Pungwe River to get rid of it and pull their hair out and the rest of it. But he'd shot one guy, shot him in the lower back right-hand buttock, which removed one testicle, and the guy was not going anywhere. But when they grabbed him, he had a pistol, a Tokarev, which indicated that he was not just a normal povo, comrade. Yeah. And they, after a gentle bit of talking to him in the bush there, they identified that he was a local commissar, and he got all his documents and the rest of it. The SB came and took him away. Wapanyika came up to join me and whatever, and now we were going up into the area, and we split up a bit, and he went, and this is the next day in the darkness, he went and stopped by a shop. Now, if you can visualize those shops, it had the 2 sort of opening arches and the entrance to the shop, and then a little bit of a veranda, and then the double sort of stable door with 2 windows and whatever. He was sitting on the left hand, facing out on the left hand against the window on the veranda there with the wall. And my one Corporal Taugara Morira was sitting against the pillar facing him. Now it got to about 7, 8 o'clock at night, and for some reason the gooks had found them. They opened up with them. They fired 2 RPG, 2 rockets at them, hit above the window, and each shot. Wapanyika was slightly injured. Taugara was seriously injured. I was over the hill. I didn't have any signal or anything like that. And he then in chopper came and he was casevaked at night. This is where certain guys were, the chopper pilots were certainly brave. That in that Hondi very misty area and all the rest, they flew in and the guy was casevaked. And there was another, Kudzaise was injured in the eye. He lost part of his sight in his one eye. Okay, so the body was taken away. Or the guy was taken away, taken to Harare Hospital in those days. We then carried on. First light, we're now moving back. We're told we've got to come back to base. So we're walking down, and as we come past there's a forest, a rainforest there, and we're on a road, and suddenly we see something in the road. We look there, and what the Gooks used to do was they used to put mealie meal, sadza, around a mine and cover it with a bit of plastic and everything, so that the sniffer dog would not sniff at the engineer's dog. But what happens is the other dogs come and eat the sadza, find they can smell the sadza, rip it up, and there's the mine exposed, which then we call the engineers, but by the time the engineers had got there, I'd pulled it out and taken it out and everything, much to the not pleasant comments from the engineers. It's not my job. But anyway, then we walked back to get onto the road that goes from the DC's camp to get to Eastern Highlands, and we told, listen, the vehicle's coming to pick you up there. There's been an incident at Katiu. SB is going to lead the way, and they will show you what's going on. And they arrived there in a Leopard, the little VW thing with their VW engine. And they said to me, climb in the front. I said, yeah, I don't climb in that thing. They said, we need to talk to you. We need to brief you. Other guys get into the vehicle. Somehow 5 or 6 sticks got into the vehicle. Off we went. And as we'd gone past Eastern Highlands, Tier State, and we're now heading off to Katiu, next minute in front of us on the road, it explodes. Now, this is all in a period of a day and a half. Okay, the road explodes. What we found out later was that they fired an RPG-7 at us, and it hit the road in front of us about 10 meters. They weren't able to calculate properly. 10 meters in front of us. We debust, and contact took place and all the rest of it. And we then swept through a village, and the village was empty, absolutely empty. So we then slept on the other side of the village. Nothing happened. We came back to the base. We walked back to base and so forth. That was one incident in there. There was another incident where some territorials were driving down that same road going to Eastern Highlands, Tier State. They got ambushed at night, and only one guy was hit, and he was hit in the head, and he was instantly killed. Then they ambushed another convoy that was coming down the road, and nobody could get there, and we could only get there as it was getting dark. And there was a truck burning, and behind it was a fire tank. It was a tanker with fuel in it, and everybody scarpered, run, left this tanker close to the. I didn't think much about it. I just walked up. The thing started up and reversed it away, and everybody said, "You're crazy." Well, what do you do? If you leave it there, the fire might make it burn. So we just reversed it, and that was another incident we had. And there were quite a few instances. One instance where we conjured up a black flag operation where scouts came into the area, and we had a contact with them. Now, that was quite well-known guy, ex-SAS guy, who was in charge of that scouts group called Whispering Jim Lafferty. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Okay, and
I think I have.
We had this contact, and the contact was, and they ran back, and they pretended they were wounded, and they ran through the villages, and people assisted them with their scratches and whatever, and out of that there just came a bag full of information. And then the scouts went in and started clapping the guys in their own manner, sorting them out. And that was just shortly after that. Then Forsyth took us to this other place, quite close to where the DC's camp was. There was this graded flat area, and in came artillery. And not with the standard 25-pounder, but with the G1, South African G1 cannon. The one with the...
with the pistons and the fire. It was a 505, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like, 5.5, yeah. And there was these hill things in Mozambique where they said there were massive caves and everything, big enough for a chopper to fly inside of it, where the Gooks used to stay there. We never went there to have to have a recce inside of it. That was a sort of SAS scouts type of job. But when we were based at that Rhodesia airfield is down there. That's where we were based at.
Yeah.
there was the armored cars were down there, and I've forgotten about. I just remember they hit a contact, and the tours ran from the contact because now they suddenly realised we're meeting 90mm cannons and 50 Brownings and 303 Brownings, 30 Brownings and whatever, and they ran to take cover. Some of them in the shop in Mozambique. Well, I'm just trying to think. I think his name was O'Reilly or something like that, with a typical Irish attitude and red hair and all. And he just said, I won't use the language he used. He bounced a 90mm on the front veranda, and it went through the two doors, and the back of that whole shop just disintegrated. And an absolute successful little. When the choppers came over, they were quite upset with him because he'd spoiled their fun. He'd taken all the fun out of the whole thing. The gooks just disappeared from that area, and it became very quiet for quite a while. Now here comes the sad part. Now we go back. Each one of us had to go back. We stayed in the Hondi Valley, and each platoon went back on relief every 6 weeks, sort of thing, 10 days back. Well, when I got back, I had to go back to Fort Vic. I was then instructed that I had to take the body of Corporal Taugara Morira to his family. And my platoon with two 4.5s and a Unimog, coffin on the Unimog, off we went to just the southern, you go past Bakita, I don't know if you know the Bakita area, and his family stayed just across the left-hand side of the other side of the road from Bakita in the Gutu area. And we drove there, and as we got there, we had to climb up some dwalas, those bare rock type things, and we got the Unimog there to go up, and it wouldn't go up. Okay, so now what happened was we were going to go up this dwala with the Unimog, and the Unimog wouldn't go. There was just one coffin on it. We reversed it. We tried again. It wouldn't go. We reversed it. We took the coffin up, and it drove up. We took the coffin off, and it drove up. So we reversed it, the coffin back in, and it wouldn't go in. So now we had to carry this coffin about 1.5 kilos. And we carried the coffin, and the trucks drove steadily behind us. No problems, anything like that. You see, it makes certain funny things of Africa. And excuse me, we get to the village, they take the body, the coffin, and they put it in the house. Now it's traditional, they break a hole in the wall, and they take the coffin in. That house is going to be broken down later. And they take the body out of the coffin, and they wash the coffin, they wash the body, and then they dress it up in its fancy clothes. Well, when they took the body out, it was still covered in the blood. He's still in his camouflage. This is from RAR hospital, still covered in blood, and his uniform is still there with all the holes in it. They took his body out dressed him, washed his body, took those camouflage, and they sewed it together while we were there, sewed it all up neat and tidy again, and put his body back in a coffin. In the meantime, I was then instructed they needed to shoot a cow or a bull. I shot a bull. I used my pistol to do that. Then the cultural thing is then the body is taken out and is taken to the grave, which normally dig a hole, which is about 2 meters by about 750 wide, and it goes down about 2 meters, 2.5 meters, and then they dig a little enclave into the bottom and the side of it. And what happens is the coffin is lowered down there and then slid into the side place, and they fill it up with mud there where the coffin should be, where you would think it was, and then they lay a layer of rock over that, flat rock over there, and then they fill the coffin up. At the head of where the coffin is, they put a reed. Now the reed is for the spirit to be released through the reed out. That's how they think. Then the coffin, then the top of the grave is leveled, and all the rest of the stones put around, and some broken pots put on top. Okay, so that he may cook better. Then imagine now it's getting to last light, and I to send the trumpeter up onto the hill, and he then plays the last post about 400 meters away from us on this hill. Last light. It was quite eerie in the middle of Africa, and there's a guy playing the last post. It was
that must have brought tears to your eyes, Chris.
It was the only guy I've lost in 20 years in combat. Only guy. Taugara Morira. That's why I remember his name. I had other guys who were killed in vehicle accidents and things like that. It's the only guy in combat I ever had. And then we drove to Fort Vic and carried on with our operations back into the Hondi Valley and the rest of it, doing OPs and stuff like that. Then we moved from there. We were taken to Mrewa, and just north of Mrewa, which is near Mtoko. I was sent to go and do an OP. And as we got off the vehicles last night in the afternoon, we were going there, about 4 sticks I had. We were moving through the maze. And as we came to a village, I heard the guys on the right-hand side saying, Anomanya, he's running. And we broke through that, and there was this old fields going through, and big old rock wallas, in the background. And there were these 2 guys running. And I remember standing there and coming through, and I saw this one sergeant who wasn't my platoon sergeant. He was with me. His stick was with me, Jim Tiers. And I watched him go into that typical shooting pose with an FN, lean forward, fire the shot. And I watched the tracer next to the guy on the ground. I watched him look again, lean forward, and down went the guy. I looked at that, I said,
wow.
Yo, come on, now that's not. Then went to where he stood, and I placed it 632 paces.
Wow.
It don't happen like that. Okay.
That's amazing.
African shoulder shooting.
Wow.
I just stood there. And then, of course, the guy was only wounded, so he crawled. You know that in the fields they had the contour lines, the maize fields.
Yeah.
He crawled back to take cover behind there. The guy just sat down and blew it away. He shot that part of the mound away where he was and killed him.
Okay.
And that was quite an interesting thing. Then from there, we then were sent onto this OP. And then when I was doing the OP, after about 2 days or so, we then saw some guys moving behind some rocks and rocky area into this bush area. I didn't have any other OP covering that area, so I said to the guys, "Listen, I said to the company headquarters, I said, I'm going to go down and have a look what's going on." So I withdrew behind, and I went, and there. Now here's the other part. I came there, and there was a wooden hut, a whole lot of people sitting around, people, okay, and there was this hut. It had a roof on it, thatch roof, and poles, but no daga in between. So inside of that was a young girl, about 14 years or so, and with her some old men and old women, and they were talking, and she was talking as well. She was talking as if she was a young girl, as if she was an old man, as if an old woman. And then I looked, and then she turned her head and she said something in Shona, which I didn't catch. I turned to one of my guys, and my guys were now frightened. I said, "What did she say?" She says, "Aha, there's one here who did not believe before, but now he has seen, he believes." She was looking at, she stood with her back to me, but she turned her head around and faced me.
It took a lot.
No, she's Sukiro. She was a Sukiro.
Wow.
Yeah.
Giving me chills just hearing this.
Yeah, it was quite scary.
I've seen some evil stuff too. Good Lord, carry on.
So I withdrew out of that situation. Not a problem. My guys are a little bit scary. And then we're told to go and check north of the area. We had to go up past some gomos and go check where there was possibly a camp. We went there, we found the old remains of what was left there, a temporary base. Then we were walking back, and this is all within a period of a day and a half. Now we're walking back, and we're coming down this little sort of flay area, hill on the left-hand side, hills on that side, and it's myself. I'm just trying to think, the sergeant, I had a sergeant for some reason, I don't know why, and I had 2 troopers. One was, the sergeant was a Shona. Other trooper was Peter January. He was a Indebele, and the other one is a guy called Nadini. Remember, I spoke about the Xhosas. Nadini came from that area. Yeah. And as we're going down there, I see this cow back in the side. And as I look at it, the cow's back goes down. I knew, whoa, we're in an ambush zone. So I just turned left, and I said, turn left, advance. Well, needless to say, the Shona, he just ran away, okay, because there was some, as I was running forward, it was like movies. In the ground, you could see the rounds hitting in the, because it rained the previous night. You could see it hitting in the ground. There was no dust or anything. You could just see the splats on the ground. And we ran forward, and Yuri, he ran, the Indebele ran to a rock, which only came up to his waist and sat there, and he was just shooting. ran to some big rocks, and I heard metal clanking. I look around the rock. There's a F1 grenade. I take cover behind there and move with this. I hear another clank, and there I look there. There's thrown another grenade at me, and then I look between it. There's I'm ready. I'm jumpy as hell. And anyway, I had chest. Used to carry chest webbing on my, and in this here on my right side, I would have a white phos M970. I never carried fragmentation, only white phos. Because in a cave, fragmentation doesn't really work. We had to do a lot of cave peering and stuff. So you throw a white phos and that clears them out. They come out there like a hot weasel way. So I then put this white phos and I threw it. And then I shot Sergeant Tucker was his name. I shot Sergeant Tucker. Yes, he's far away over there. Where are you? I'm bringing the other soldiers, he said. But there was no other soldiers, just a stick. See? Now my other sticks are down in the valley, far away there, and they come on the radio. I could hear them coming. Yeah, we are coming, Isha. We are coming. And then the Rebro station on the top of the hills, it had the colored guys, and they're saying 5353. You know, are you having a contact? Yeah, I'm certainly having a contact. Okay, 00530. So we this contact place, and then we basically finished it, and the gooks are going at that stage. And then choppers came, and we found there were 16 packs lying there, and I still have the AK bayonet from one pack that was there. And they ran away. Then all my tracking sticks that I said there, I said, go and look over that side. They went off there. We slept in the contact area. And what happens at 3 o'clock in the morning? It rains. But before that, I wake up in the morning and I say, "Eesh, Tez, they did the Tunde all over the place. They wet themselves all over." I said, "No issue. That was you." I pissed myself. I'd wet myself in it. Then I thought, hey, the gooks said he wet themselves out, and they said, "No, it's that was you. We could smell it."
I don't blame you, crumbs. I would have shit myself as well as wet myself.
Yeah, that was serious. Then of course, then I was sent to start up a tracking platoon, which wasn't in C company, in support company, and that was with a guy called Cameron Davies. I think his name was Morgan Davies, and I'm just trying to think of Jean Voss was the 81s, John Brand was the 60 mils. Forget who the guy was for the 106s. I was the tracker platoon. My platoon became quite a large platoon because we had to supply 2 sticks to each company. Okay. No, hang on. 3 sticks to each company, a stick to each platoon. So I was having now in the battalion of 4 companies, it's now 16 sticks of 4 men. So I was about 50, and I had a guy, John Mwandi, as my platoon warrant officer. Quite a few sergeants and whatever, and we were again. After we did a lot of training at Mushandik, you know, where Mushandik Reserve is just to the west of Fort Victoria, on the way to what's it? There's a mining town next to it. Yeah.
And
anyway,
were you a captain or a major at this point, Chris?
No, I was a lieutenant.
Still a lieutenant.
Yeah.
A full lieutenant.
That came a long time afterwards. A little sweat and a couple of bullet holes. Anyway, so I was sent back into that Mrewa area to a place called Brera, and I had to do OPs there. Well, the OP lasted 21 days. But when I say to you, the gomo that I was sitting on the side of the gomo wasn't a gomo, it was a pintle. That's how big it was, and it was about 75 meters away from a kraal. And I was there 21 days, and I never knew I was there. We were looking at Guerrera mission, watching there, and the gooks used to be wounded, and they used to come to the mission. And as they're coming to the mission, 0, this is 5-3, we have some sight. And out of that we got, I think it was 17 kills in the fire force.
Good one.
And every 4th or 5th day, one of us had to have to walk back to the road alone. That was about 5.5 kilometers away. So we'd walk back, pick up rations that they dropped us, and walk back with the sack over your back, bring it back and split rations. And so that happened 4 times. So each one of us had to walk back to the road. That thing. It was quite scary when you walk on your own. What that I left out is when I was on trekking course, we had this little exercise where they late in the afternoon, they say to you, go down to at Wafa Wafa where the training place is, go down into the lake. You've got to go in there, take your water bottle out. You've got to go into the water up over your head. So you've got nothing, not even a magazine pouch, just a magazine rifle. Come out of the water, and they say, now you've been taught how to make fire and all the rest of it. And they tell you, okay, off you go, get onto the vehicle. And as you're getting onto the vehicle, they give you an egg. And they say, tomorrow morning, when you come back, the egg is anubika, it's cooked. Okay. Off they go, and they drop you on this road, about 3 to 4 kilos apart. So you're on your own, one man. They say you must go 500 meters into the bush. Now, remember, you're on a trekking course. You can't bulldoze people. Those guys will track you. They know if you lie. Anyway, off we went, and there's different ways of making your fire and cooking your egg. And the way I did mine was I walked into the bush, and then you got your stick for making a fire, and your base stick, which I carried stuck on my rifle, so it was easy for me to do that. Okay, the rolling stick is Muzambaringa, or you can use Sasori, and the base stick is Ndomba. It looks like a twisted wrist, the bronze. That's how you make a base stick out of it. You take the very fine bora stuff there and elephant dung, and you make your place where on your stick where the coal is going to drop out, make your fire. Then you dig a hole, you put some mapani leaves in there, you put your egg there, you put some mapani leaves over the top, you put about 40 mils of sand over the soil back over it, then you move your fire onto there, right? Before you move your fire, then you urinate on the area there. Okay, now that soaks everything and then you put your fire on. Then all people tell you about making a boma with thorn trees, buffalo thorn trees. Let me tell you, a lion just goes, sweeps it aside once, and the elephant just tramples over it. Remembering that a lion can spring 7 meters, you have to find a big tree. You find a big tree. Okay, you climb up there, you take your web belt, and you put it on, and you sleep with your rifle like that. Now, you've only got one magazine. Now, you fire a shot, you're off the course. So that was that part of it. And the next morning, now we come back to the road. We're waiting. I'm standing there, and I hear the 4-5 coming, but long way away. And I hear this cough, and onto the road, about 50 meters away from me, into the road steps a leopard. He walks right past me like that. Goes about 20 meters, goes into the bush. I'm not moving. By the time you want to take your rifle like that, it's too late as far as I'm concerned. I just stood. Maybe I was frozen with fear, I don't know, but I wasn't sweating or anything like that. Next minute, on Ashburner was the tracking guy, comes down the road, and he stops, he looks on the road, looks to me, he walks from there to me, and he said, how long have you been here? I said, yeah, I've been here about half an hour. So he said, did you see anything? I said, yes. There's you officers. I've been in the bush for 20 years, and I've never had an experience like it. How did you feel with the lion, with the leopard? I said, I don't know. I didn't even move. Because I don't blame you. It would have been too late anyway. That was part of the trekking course. It was interesting. The Timbawa, the little rat, it's got 2 stripes on his back. They made us eat a python the one time. We ate a baboon. And they taught me a lot of things about how you do things in the bush with food, with meat that is not really good to eat, how you must cook it the right way through to kill any sort of infection or anything like that. And then that then I had to make a platoon into a reconnaissance platoon, which I then did a lot of training at Mozambique again. And then I was seen, now at that stage, 2 RAR was running Grand Reef. And I was sent in there as the fire force tracking stick. So anyway, lots of fire force, just about every second day or so, fire force. I nearly forgot how to, in the Matasa TTL, we had a contract there, we were called in, and so I got a scar on my throat here. We're walking up a hill, and we'd been dropped off, and there was a gomo, and the gooks were in amongst the rocks and everything like that. And and we heard a sound in front of us behind a big rock. And I took a white phosphorus and I threw it over the rock. It will ping like it normally goes. The next minute from past there was a spark coming off the rock there, and part of the grenade casing came to and whacked me in the neck. I was on my back. I was again sort of, the guy said, "No, it's not spitting, you are living." I put a bomb bandage on there. But there where I saw a very brave man called O'Driscoll, Corporal O'Driscoll from RLI. There was a crack in this big rock, and some of the gooks had run in there, and he was on top of there on his own. He shot one guy, and then he started to have hard extractions on his rifle. We don't know why. And then he's picking it out, and then he'd lean and shoot the next guy, take his rifle, put the cartridge out, and go forward. He shot about 4 guys doing that. And then a guy broke out of there and ran forward and ran out around a big tree, and the K car saw him. And the K car shot him. And later I went down to look at the body. The guy must have been about 6'8", and he was in a clean overall, and he was colored. And the K car hit him properly. It was very dead. And we flew back that afternoon. There's so many incidences. Then I was sent. I'm just trying to think of what the BSAP inspector's name was, SASB. He's actually lived in this area. I met him after the time, and he remembered the incident where he sent me into the Burma Valley, and I had to go over into Mozambique and do OPs there and call in. What was happening, there's a road, and what was happening was the tours were going in a truck and being dropped off there, and then walking into Rhodesia. And what we would have to do is sit there and call in fire force, which normally was not the fire force with allies. What would happen was the hunters would come in and strafe the convoy or whatever. And anyway, for some reason or other, they found us. We were about 5 kilos inside of there. They discovered we were there, and the next minute we heard these rockets, these like 122 rockets flying over, but they were overshooting us. And then we looked down, and in the valley there was a long line of the Frelimo guys or whatever coming uphill. So we called for hot extraction and started legging it up. You got to now run up the hill. You were on a little spur. You got to run up the hill to get over back into Rhodey, and we're running. So eventually I realized, this B-22 radio is no good for us. So I was carrying a silent Sterling. Shot it with the half a magazine of 9mm, so that the radio is damaged. I took a white phos, put it underneath there, and we carried on running. And the chopper came, and he put down you got a boom that hangs down on a rigging, and we trained before at Grand Reef. We had to clip our little thing that we had in our shirt, clip in, pull this like a safety belt under your buttocks, and then the chopper would take us. Except that this chopper is now trying to get away so fast that he took us for 100 meters run. We ran, 4 of us running together with our legs inside this thing. Anyway, picks us up, he takes us over. The hunters do a dummy strike on them and all the rest of it. And I've left out parts of the story. It's become, we get Dan back inside of Burma Valley. We now take the boom, we're going to put it in, we're going to climb in the chopper, and the technician says to the sergeant who's with me, he says, no, go down, wash. He had an accident in the Pence Sea, and they had to go to the river and wash his trousers and whatever. Then he was allowed to climb in the chopper and back to Grand Reef.
Poor bugger. Anyway,
it was quite exciting. I'm just trying to think of who that the SB guy, what his name was. His daughter lives in this area, and his son-in-law live in this area. He flies microlights and sprays the area now, and he's got a game farm up in the top area here.
Not Mike Norton, no.
No. Rob Weaver, his name, and Prentice, Inspector Apprentice, I think his name was the guy who was his father-in-law. he was the inspector who sent me into that. I went to see him some years back here. And I remember you, full of balls and whatever. And yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. You're lucky to come out of that one alive. Anyway, so that was that incident, and then I developed a swelling in my groin, and I went there and they said you got with the groin bulges out. And,
like a hernia.
I had a hernia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to go into Fort Vic Hospital, and they cut. In those days, because you were there for a week or 10 days, and then you were 3 months light duties. Well, later on, I've had 3 hernia operations. The last one I had is I drove down from Messina. I drove down to One Mill in Pretoria, had the operation that morning. That afternoon, I drove back.
Good Lord.
So it's changed the techniques and all the rest of it. Anyway, so now because I was 3 months, I was then posted to Balabala, Boreal. And the training was intense. 3 months training for a black soldier in comparison to the old days where an RAR of black soldier was 6 months. And we had guys there, Fouché, who was a class sergeant at RLI when I was going to go on officer's course, and he gave me the uphill and all the rest. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He had a big patch on the side of his face. Kind of a nice guy. I got on very well with him. He was the training wings commander, and there was guys, Tom Madewell, who was in Scouts. There was a guy called Dick Delaney. Dick Delaney was American Special Forces. He also flew Cobras, besides Hueys. He could fly Cobras. And then he eventually left us. And when we got our Cheetahs, our Cobras, remember the Bell 205s? Okay, the Bell 205s he was then there training the guys how to fly it. And then training happened there. We used to go to Mayfair, and there were incidences there in Mayfair Dam where there's a bulb that you get in the ground. It's called a zipete. It's like a big onion. Okay, but you cut it, and you cut a block off about the size of a matchbox. You put it in a glass of water, and you shake the beer glass of water. Shake it out. You put another thing of water. You shake it again, and you put some more water, and you shake it again, and then you drink the water, and then you see the snakes and all sorts of things. See, and now we had guys on top of a hill, which was our rebro back to Balabala, and they had been drinking Nzipete. So they put out 4 drums of F2, which was there for the chopper, because there were so many snakes around. Burnt the whole hill. Right? That was some of the fun that we had in that area. And just before I got there, in that training area, they were doing jungle lane and stuff like that. And in the far distance, they were doing fire and movement. There was a guy, Sergeant Moffat, who was training the guys as well. And the guys were telling me he was standing there at the jungle range. There was this, where these guys had been firing forward, there's this whacka, and he hit him, this round hit him in the buttocks. And he fell down, and they put him into a truck as a vacuum. And now they took x-rays at Bulawayo Hospital and all that. There was the round inside of his trucks and everything like that. Now they were going to operate and everything. They cut off his trousers and everything. And as they cut off his trousers and open his cheek, round falls out from between his cheeks. Yeah. So we had some exciting times there. I had an incident where we got information, some groups were there. So now we're taking recruits. It's a bit desperate when you're doing that. We're driving down the road. We had the Orioles that had the armored front, taken away all the cab, and it had the armored front there. They were driving through, and I was coming in a Land Rover behind. So I had to go to SB at Labuzi. And before I went, and so I sent the guys ahead with the sergeant major and all the rest of it. And we're going there, and they got to mine. And nothing happened to the driver, nothing happened to the guys, because we had the sandbags in the back and all the rest of it. But it was quite an interesting situation in respect to that. In another training session, we used to have 2 rifles there that we used to shoot bussies and feed the guys and whatever. And the one day on this big rock thing. I was looking over there, and I had 1 or 2 troops with me, one with a mag and so forth. And there was this group of wild pig. I've never seen before a wild pig in a group like that. So I looked at that. My troops were over there, far away. I went back to the guy with the mag. I took it from him because I handled mag as in support group. I handled it quite a lot. And I let fly at these things with the mag. Got 7 pig. And and the funny part was, he ran right. We could see it in the distance. Ran to where the guys were in the trenches. Man, you saw the pig into the trench, saw the troops out of the trench, and then the pig out of the trench and troops back in the trench. Then that night, we had ngurube, took them out of the trench, and we ate the pigs. We cooked them up that night and ate them. Each guy got his big chunk of meat. They were tough as anything.
Oh, I bet they love that.
Oh, they were so tough. It reminds me, going to Katona, when I was in Katona, I was sent to go and get meat because, remember, we had those gas fridges. Our gas fridge broke down, so all our nyama went rotten. So, and Forsyth sent me to go and shoot some nyama. I go in a Unimog, myself and a sergeant major and the driver and another guy. We're going along there, and right in front of me, there's an eland. I didn't take into consideration the consequences thereof. I shot it. We drive up to it. One shot, next shot, hit. The sergeant major says, "Now," he said, "how are we going to load this thing?" 4 of us. We had 1 machete and 1 Swiss Army knife. Got back at about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Forsyth was not a very pleasant mood. He thought that I'd sacrificed in the bushes there, and he had to write a massive board of inquiry and whatever. Anyway, we got back. The guys slaughtered that thing. The next day, it looked like a meat market with every thorn tree around were hanging their nyama, and I ate it, finished it like that. There's so many instances. Oh yeah, with Forsyth as well. We went down to Bowley, and I had quite a big good contact. We went first of all to Buffalo Range. From Buffalo Range, we went down to Chipinapools. Just past Chipinapools, there was a DC's camp.
Oh, yeah.
We based up in that DC's camp, and then while we were in that DC's camp, one of our platoons was taken away and was sent to go and get involved in a external, which they duly did. On the way back, we lost our admin color sergeant. What happened was they drove past a bouncing bomb. I'd never heard about anything like that, but this bomb flew out there. It wasn't a bomb Z. It was like a 60 mil in a casing thing, and you pull the tripwire, and it threw this thing out about 2 meters and exploded. And it was a very unusual name of this color sergeant that was killed. He got 1 piece of shrapnel and killed him. Nobody else was injured. Now I was posted to Bala Bala. I was there for quite a while, 20 months. That's over 3,000 soldiers trained. I was then sent back to Fort Victoria as AQSO4, I thought, until I arrived at Bala Bala, and the brigade major happened to be Nicholas Galloway Charles Forsyth, BCR. And he looked at me and he said, "Garland, I can't get rid of you, but I'm going to try." Go across the runway, and at the runway, the other side, the old scouts camp, you'll meet a guy called Andy Young, and you go and introduce yourself and say you're going to work with the SB. I scuttle off there, I get there, and when I get there, then I meet Andy Young, and I go through a whole story, which I think I don't want to spoil it in the future, but the whole concept of the Fumarevanu, Security Force Auxiliaries, okay, in the Hots and Mines, which I believe if it had been done 2 years before, the consequent, in the way that we were doing it, with the way that Nick Forsyth wanted it, in what they call the oil spot concept, okay, under McEwen, Lieutenant Colonel John J. McEwen's Art of Counter-Revolutionary Warfare, that concept, we would have changed the whole outcome of the war. Okay, and I just watched with absolute disbelief as I saw how the Sumner forces did it to us. You know what I mean? unfortunately, it's quite a long story, and I don't want to sort of give too much information, because there's a lot of guys around who are still here, and I communicate with them every now and again. One of them is an Australian, and when I phone him, he says, "What do you want, Garland? Don't phone me at this time of the day." Anyway, so I think that the whole idea of it was good. Unfortunately, there were some people who weren't exactly on sides with us on the whole thing, and the infiltration of our forces with opposition intelligence people who were operators within amongst us and so forth, which I found out while I was at Bala Bala, that there was a certain person who was at ComOps who had compromised an operation into Botswana. And believe it or not, he worked for South Africa.
Oh, it really sickens me that all those things happened.
Yeah, but that's how war is. You know what I mean? It's war is not just killing; it's about intelligence and psychological operations and the rest of it and so forth. And I don't know if I'm sort of closing off on the stuff now, or I'm being a bit too early or whatever.
Chris, I've been absolutely totally absorbed by what you've had to say. I found it really interesting. It's obvious to a person like me who's not heard your story before that you've just got so much more to tell. So I'm definitely going to invite you back for a second or possibly even a third talk. There's an awful lot more to cover, especially about Fuma Rivanu, your time in 121 Battalion in Southwest Africa. There's just so much more to go through. I'd also like to hear more detail on some of those Fire Force ops, your recce ops, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So definitely part 2 is coming. So if the audience can just look forward to that in a couple of weeks' time. When we're off camera, I'll set up a time and we'll make a booking for the next talk. But I can't thank you enough for today's talk. It's been absolutely fascinating. It's come through very fluidly, very, very interesting. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on board.
Okay, I will try and get you some pics as well, so that you've got pics for the next time and so forth. As many as I can, because I've got certain parts of them. But from being a troop in Greens and RLI to officer cadet, and not many in RAR, but I've even got a picture of that Taugara Marira.
Excellent.
On the hill.
Excellent. And Chris, please do write a book. And if you ever want help publishing it, just come back to me, okay?
I need guidance on that, on the style. Sometimes you put things too militarily in line, people aren't interested in that. You know what I mean?
Well, there's some that are and some that aren't. I think the best way to write a book is from your heart, involving the emotions you felt in line with what you were seeing and doing is very, very interesting to people. So thank you so much, Chris. And
pleasure.
I'm going to sign off now, and I so look forward to part 2. Hey.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And 3, 4, and 5.
I appreciate you inviting me. I really do.
Wonderful.
And I hope people find it interesting.
Oh, promises.
Yeah.
I was fixated by your talk. Thanks very much, Chris.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you as well.
You too, Chris. Cheers, my man.
Cheerio.